Fantastic. Thank you all so much for coming today. This is such an exciting panel. I'm really pleased to be here with these distinguished panelists to talk about something that I'm passionate about, which is XR technologies and education, right? So we now have these tools that permit what was previously impossible. They give us the feeling of sharing space in real time with people in any geographic or physical location. They facilitate real human connection and allow us to visit places we never dreamed we could visit. They give us access to scales that we can't experience with our physical bodies and open up the possibility to create whatever we can imagine. So why wouldn't we use these incredible new tools and experiences to expand and enhance education? Well, sometimes it takes bold acts of imagination and determination to make such things happen. People who are innovative and have drive and know how to collaborate to achieve large goals. The people on this panel are just such people. Dreamers, innovators, trailblazers, people who know how to get things done, people who have made Metaversities a reality. We have Steve Grubbs here, who is the CEO of VictoryXR, Monica Arez from Meta, the head of education and immersive learning, Dr. Messina Morris, who is the Metaversity Director at Morehouse College, and Saralyn Menendez-Mendoza, who is the XR lead at T-Mobile. Great. So happy to have you here today. So, but what is a Metaversity? It's in the title of the panel. Let's ask someone who knows and who may have even invented the term. Steve, can you tell us the origin story of the Metaversity Project and what a Metaversity is? And I think you might even have some very exciting news to also break to us this afternoon.
Well, first, can we play that tape, Chuck?
Or Scott?
Or, yeah. I was guessing. So what you see here is, this is, first of all, Southwestern Oregon Community College, Karen Alexander's project. And you're seeing a digital twin. And now you're seeing students at Morehouse College under the tutelage of Dr. Morris. And now you see the cadaver lab at Fisk University along learning about that. Now this is the digital twin at Morehouse College and the Ray Charles Performing Arts Center, and you'll see really there's the modeling is hyper-realistic.
It's beautiful.
And again, the Ray Charles Performing Arts Center. So what you see there are digital twin campuses, and Metaversities are very simply the combination of two words, metaverse and university. It's a way that students can come together in a live, synchronous way to learn with their professors, fellow students, and others. And if you think about where the world is going, so for hundreds of years, the world has centralized. We moved from rural areas to urban areas, and people came together in groups. But now, we are living in this area where that's tipped, and decentralization is occurring. We no longer have to drive to a bank to do our banking. We no longer have to fly across the world burning jet fuel to attend a university. Now, we can do it from where we are, and geography no longer becomes a limiter. And so the very first pioneer of a fully functional Metaversity was Morehouse College. Now, they're not a... and I want to brag a little bit on Morehouse College, because while Stanford was experimenting with one class, Morehouse College jumped in and did an entire semester, 3 classes, 4 professors, and they remain the global leader today, this small campus of 2,000 students in Atlanta, Georgia. So I love that, and I won't talk a lot more, but just know that what we think of as the future is happening right now at Morehouse College, and through the assistance of our friends at Qualcomm, T-Mobile, and Meta, and Vive.
Absolutely.
Happening on other campuses across the United States.
Yeah. Great, great, yeah. Really fantastic, really fantastic. So, and Steve, you and I met, as you said, when I reached out to you about the possibility of including my client, Southwestern Oregon Community College, in the Metaversity Project. Can you name the other institutions who are participating?
I can, but I forgot my big announcement.
Your big announcement, yeah, don't forget your big announcement.
I got so excited. So today we announced, along with American High School outside of Florida, that the first full nation signed up to deliver education to their students through a meta campus. And it's the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Their Minister of State announced today, if you think about perfect use cases, they have 700 islands, 30 that are occupied by people. How do you bring all of those students together in one location to provide them access to engineering, computer science, a Mandarin teacher, et cetera? So, Karen, in answer to your question, off the top of my head, West Virginia University, University of Kansas, South Dakota State, New Mexico State, Cal State, Northern Illinois,
UMGC.
University of Maryland Global, of course, Fisk, Morehouse College, and
that's 10. You got
Southwestern Community College.
and you said Southwestern.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so these colleges, the institutions vary quite a lot in their geographical locations and their focus. I mean, in Kansas, it's the nursing school that is particularly involved, and the subjects that they'll be teaching, and that speaks to the broad possibilities for this educational model. And I've been able to see how the talents, the combined talents of your team and the support of Meta make it possible for a small institution with limited resources to make the leap into the metaverse for education years before it would have otherwise been possible. I hope I'm not stealing any thunder here, but Meta funded the building of the virtual campus, the digital twin of the campuses, and the VictoryXR team modeled them out beautifully, I might say. And Meta also donated headsets for student and faculty, and the faculty are undergoing professional development training by the VictoryXR team in order to teach effectively in VR. So this is not just like, creating virtual worlds and throwing headsets on students, but it's very thoughtful, very well developed. So Monica, can you give us your perspective on how this project began and what you see as the possibilities that Metaversities present?
Yeah, sure. It's funny, on the drive down, I was thinking about how it began way before you'd think. I mean, Steve and I think, met in this building, or maybe the conference center a couple miles down the road, way back in the early days. We were both pioneering and trying to evangelize, through these talks, what immersive technology could actually bring to the learning world. And we were met with a tiny bit of curiosity, but honestly, it was a whole lot of skepticism all the time. So it was an exhausting job. But then everything changed when the pandemic hit. And suddenly we were thrust into this global experiment where we had to figure out how to bring learning online and engage our students without the use of classrooms or labs or field trips or practicums. And I think we quickly realized that we could actually increase access to education through online learning. That was revolutionary for the pandemic. But we are delivering mainly knowledge. And I think to have a truly valuable learning experience, you have to unlock curiosity and creativity and connection. And we were missing all of that. And so we were suddenly faced with this enormous challenge that Steve was thinking about, we were thinking about, the world started thinking about. And the solution was really, how do we connect people in digital spaces where they have a true sense of presence, where they can use full body language, they can pass objects to each other, and they can actually communicate as if they were together, even if they're half a world apart from each other. And suddenly, I think the affordances of the metaverse and metaversities started to be the most compelling thing we could bring to the future of education, and really the true solution to increasing access to education and fundamentally transforming how we learn. And so Steve was already 2 steps ahead of the world there. He'd already been thinking about how to solve these. Morehouse came in, and they were our first partner, where we were able to bridge together this partnership between VictoryXR and Meta and really start to bring value to students to help engage them during the pandemic. So as you saw, beautiful digital twins that were advantageous not just to the students who were there, but alumni who wanted to come back and visit, and prospective students who couldn't travel to these spaces. And the learning was so engaging, not only for people who had to dial in, but we actually could do things differently. We could play with scale and time travel and things that we couldn't do before just with our regular tools. And so collectively, we started really opening up this first step into the future of learning, where I think we can finally start to really break down some of those barriers that currently exist in education. And so thrilled to have this partnership and the brilliant minds together to really start driving solutions in this space.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Monica. And you really spoke to the ways that XR engages our sense of embodiment and our natural desire to explore and learn. And I think it's so wonderful that this project exists to draw on those affordances to further learning and education. Let's go to Sari now and to hear from her about T-Mobile's involvement in the Metaversity Project and why it's important to you and to the company.
Yeah, so sure. We actually got involved in the Metaversity Project because Steve was doing some work with Fisk University. So VictoryXR, does it sound really loud to everyone, or is it just me?
No, you sound great.
So VictoryXR, Fisk University, HTC, and T-Mobile, of course, partnered to launch a virtual reality campus at Fisk. VR biology lab as well. We have a T-Mobile conference room on the Fisk University virtual reality campus as well. We've supported biology courses. We supported, I believe it's an African American history course where we've even brought high school students from one side of the country to be led through history alongside students from Fisk University and the other side of the country. So that's at least how our involvement with the Metaversities Project started, and we're actively working in other initiatives with VictoryXR, and we're definitely fans of his work. So we supported, of course, with funding on the project, and of course, the 5G component, right? Because there's really not a lot that you can do if you don't have a connectivity element in all of the virtual reality conversation. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. Connectivity is so important. It's like the lifeblood of all the technology we work with. So Fisk University, which T-Mobile supported along with VictoryXR, was one of the first institutions to get involved in the Metaversity Project alongside Morehouse College, beginning in the spring of 2021. Is that correct, Dr. Morris? And you were a chemistry professor there, and now the Metaversity director at Morehouse College. So the first actual Metaversity, and you've truly been on the front lines of this innovative initiative, and you've not just seen its promise, but you've seen its impact.
Absolutely.
What has that impact been at Morehouse? And I think I've got.
I was about to say, we have some data because data drives engagement.
There we
and
go.
it drives our reasoning for doing this. So what you see here is that student achievement has increased by using virtual reality as the classroom. So what we ended up seeing was in our traditional face-to-face classes, 84% was the average overall for final grade averages, for essay grades, for presentation grades, as well as student attendance. It was the same exact thing, 84 percentile was the level of student achievement, even when we went to an online Zoom format. We made virtual reality the classroom, and we saw a 10 percentage point increase. So 11.9% increase in our grades for our students. Attendance rates went up, no withdrawals. So it was really important. If you could go to the next slide, you could actually see the comparison chart. So if you look at the comparison of face-to-face courses to VR courses outpaced what our traditional face-to-face curriculum looked like. in numbers, as well as our online format when we just made Zoom the classroom. But when we made sure that virtual reality was the way that students were engaging in the space, we saw increases beyond what we even expected. So it was amazing. There's one more.
One more.
So in terms of delivering chemistry content, we wondered how could this be used, because there's a lot of things in virtual reality already that exist from tangible items, but you can't see molecules. So it's really important to be able to increase visual spatial intelligence in students who are taking chemistry courses. We need students to access STEM and engage in it, and then also feel like they can conquer this molecular world. That's the only way that we're gonna solve some real dicey issues that we have. I mean, we're in a pandemic. So you have to understand the molecular world to understand how to solve the complexities of the scientific natural world. And what we saw was that students felt like the experience was awesome in chemistry. Like, it totally engaged them. No one thought it was terrible. No one thought it was awful, which was really, really good. I had to actually force these young men out of the headsets after like 2 hours because I was done. And we saw, when we surveyed our cohort of students who had taken this virtual reality course for chemistry, all of them said all of the modules were effective in helping them learn the content. We actually saw grades increase. We actually saw student engagement, student satisfaction, and that was what we needed at that particular time. But it continues. We're tripling our offerings. So we're not just doing this in chemistry or history or biology, but journalism and sociology. We're also adding entrepreneurship efforts. We've done mindfulness in the metaverse and so many other things. So we're giving access to people who don't take a virtual reality course. So even if you don't take a course, the purpose of a university or a college life is not just the academic part, but the party part. No, I'm just kidding. It's the social life, you know, it's the social life. So we've done a metaverse gala, we've done commencement in the metaverse, and we've had alumni come back and participate on our digital twin campus, very beautifully created by VictoryXR, very beautifully sponsored by Meta, and so many others. So we're really appreciative because the data has told us that this is something that we can continue to do. And by the fall, we would have offered 15 courses in virtual reality.
So impressive. Really, really great. It's so wonderful to see these numbers that show what I think all of us sort of know, you know, that teaching in VR, teaching in a metaverse can really engage students and help them to learn more effectively.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So we've been talking about these metaversities, and we got to see a little bit of what a metaversity looks like. And Steve, maybe you could talk a little bit more about what it means to be a metaversity as a digital twin.
Yeah, so if you think about the digital twin, you know, I think probably you're here and you know what a digital twin is, but what is the purpose of a digital twin? So for example, we solved a problem at Fisk University in that their pre-med students were needing to go to Vanderbilt University for certain classes because they didn't have a cadaver lab on campus. Well, we were able to create, with the support of T-Mobile, a cadaver lab where students can now take that class on campus without having to leave the campus. But at the same time, you know, it's in part to create a sense of familiarity, but if you have created this wonderful campus, when students put on the headset, do you want them to go directly into a chemistry lab? You can do that, but it's a great thing to allow them to what we say, spawn in right on the campus quad, or whatever the case might be, and then go to class just as you would if you were on the real campus. And so there's a tremendous effort that goes into place by both the modelers and the developers to take the actual campus, where every single tree is, where every single brick is, how every pane on the windows, and put them in the exact same place. And so Dr. Morris presented to us a challenge. They had a new building on campus with a chemistry lab. And she said, I want you to recreate this chemistry lab And so the team, I think, was able to do that with,
They did.
with Bunsen burners that turn on, or
Right.
whatever you call
Everything works. The
Yes.
showers were, I've never had to take a chemical shower, but I got to take it in virtual reality, which is a good thing. That means that I wasn't hurt at all. But the eye washes work, so you could do safety lessons there. All the cabinets open. You can put equipment in these cabinet spaces. The hoods work. The laminar flow hoods actually work. And so students can go and do certain experimentation and setups underneath the hood. And so it's a beautiful space.
And there's no danger of them getting hurt through a
None.
chemical accident,
And they need to
right?
be able to do that first, because it's the efficiency that actually, makes them good chemists, make them good at the bench, is being able to be efficient in the work they do.
Yeah.
There's one other very important point that we hadn't planned, we hadn't talked about,
Okay.
but I think it's very important to say. The world is full of good people and bad people. We all know this. And in the real world, there's sexual harassment and other things. The great thing about the Metaversity is that you can create a shield to protect yourself by turning on a setting, and you can always take the headset off, but you can protect yourself in ways that you can't do in the real world. And so you have greater safety, greater protection on a Metaversity campus than you would on a real campus. And that's a really important point to make. There are those that are trying to suggest it's otherwise in the world, but it's just not the case.
Yeah, yeah. Sad truth, yeah. So, you talked a little bit, Steve, about the fact that there are real spaces recreated in the Metaversities. And some people say, well, why would you recreate a space that already exists? And you did address that. It's a place that you might have an affinity for. For an historic institution like Morehouse College, right?
Yeah.
It's something that, students have not been able to go there during the pandemic. Being able to visit it in VR is very meaningful.
But those spaces that reflect the world in which students are used to being a part of also drives achievement. So when they are in, for like us as a historically Black college and university, a culturally responsive environment where they see artifacts that reflect their life experience, then that makes them show up fully in that space. And so it's really important to recreate spaces where students already feel comfortable, because they're using technology that is cutting edge, that is different, and it is new. And so they don't have to also learn a new skill set in a completely new environment. They can feel that familiarity and be comfortable. And so that allows them to be their best selves.
That's great, yeah. And at the same time, they can go into all kinds of possible worlds for learning, right? On the moon, or on Mars, or underwater, anywhere. So let's take it back a bit. Monica, what is the metaverse, and what is Meta's role in the metaverse?
All right, zooming way out. Actually, I feel like this is one of my favorite questions, because I've never heard it answered the same way twice. When we think of the word metaverse, it's just this open, nebulous word that most people use. I think for me, it really is just the next chapter of the internet. And that can mean a lot of things, but let's, for this conversation, keep it relevant to learning. And I think it's really interesting that over the last 40 years, I'd say every decade or so, there's been a shift in computing paradigms that have influenced how we learn. And so in the 80s, if you were curious about something, you opened up the encyclopedia. You were lucky if there was a paragraph, and even luckier if there was a picture. And so I very much remember looking up the moon landing and finding that black and white picture of the astronaut standing on the moon, and the paragraph was just 3 facts. It was like names, date, and distance. But that was my window into that part of history, and I thought it was fascinating. And so I spent a lot of time looking at that picture. And then in the 1990s, we suddenly got desktop internet. And although we had to stay tethered to our home computers or the library computers, we started to get information. Most of it was one-directional, very static websites. This was called Web 1. And then Web 2 was the iteration that we more or less have now, where the internet is full of dynamic websites that are constantly changing. Social allowed for a whole new creator economy to emerge, and mobile devices allowed us to access the internet wherever and whenever we were curious. And so we suddenly got a lot more access to knowledge that way. The next iteration is really, it's actually a lot of things. We could have a whole panel on what Web 3 or Metaverse is going to be, but as it relates to learning in this conversation, It's really the addition of having this extra immersive layer. So adding on AR, VR, MR in ways that allow us to have that presence with each other, to explore in simulated environments, or add layers through AR of 3D visualizations or information into our current world. And so if you think about what that can do for learning, instead of looking at that picture of the moon landing, you can actually hop inside of it, like Mary Poppins style, and suddenly be there. And in fact, one of our partners actually did this at the Smithsonian very recently. They took the 7,000 archival images from the original moon landings. The astronauts had cameras on their chests, and they took 7,000 pictures. And using photogrammetry and AI, they stitched them all together. And we're able to create this really incredible 3D, fully immersive experience. And so what's cool is when you put the headset on, your brain actually gets tricked into thinking that you're there. And so standing on the moon and seeing the Earth, moon, and sun in the exact same perspective that the astronauts saw, it just hits you differently. I mean, it's actually really emotional to look up and see this tiny Earth far away and realize that, one, you're a tiny nothing in the grand scheme of the whole universe, but just how far away that Earth really is. And you then take the headset off. And even though you've been standing in the same place all along, you feel like you've traveled somewhere. And I cannot think of a better way to learn than that. And so I think what's important about the metaverse, obviously it's new, we're evolving this, but it won't be built by just one institution. It's bigger than any of that. And so it's going to evolve as this collective effort between creators, developers, organizations of all sizes. And it won't just be VR. It's going to be this multimodal capability where you can seamlessly go between current 2D platforms all the way up to immersive technologies. And so as we think of what Meta's role is in all of this, one, it's to build really great hardware so people can access it. But also we care deeply about training the next generation of metaverse creators so that people can monetize and, again, help us build this and evolve it in a way that makes sense for the world. But we also are trying to make sure that we are funding high quality content so that people can truly learn differently and we can transform the entire industry in that sense. And then just making sure that we're bringing access to education through donations and through funding and through immersive technologies. So I'm very excited about what's to come, but I think the most exciting piece is that it's going to take all of us and we all have to do it together.
Absolutely.
Agreed. Yeah. And Monica, I think one of the things you described there was what you called the Tribrid approach in an article in EdSurge that just came out today about the Metaversities Project. Can you just very briefly just say what you mean by
Absolutely.
Tribrid?
So Steve made up the word metaversity. I had to make up the word too. So in our current model of education, and especially in the pandemic, you're probably familiar with the hybrid model, which is part in person and part online. It's a fantastic way to merge together what we have for learning. I think what the Metaversities allow us to do is actually create this Tribrid model, where now it will seamlessly go between in-person, online, and now in these simulated environments with that true sense of presence with immersive technologies. So that's the value that I see Metaversities bringing, and I hope where we move the future of learning.
Great, fantastic. Thank you. So, Sari, would you like to jump in here and talk about how we can make all of this fully mobile?
Yeah, that definitely sounds like something that T-Mobile would work on. No, so right now, most of these education experiences are in virtual reality, not necessarily in head-worn AR or MR, right? We think that with the power of 5G eventually, when devices evolve, right, we'll see this using 5G more and actually passing to an AR/MR model. That's part of the reasons actually that we've become the North America launch partner of Qualcomm Snapdragon Spaces. Reason for this is because we believe in the importance of fostering the content ecosystem to drive consumer and enterprise use cases in a way that we can build content together that will allow content to be available across different hardware platforms. And just like Monica said, right, this is the Metaversities Project, and quite frankly, all these initiatives around consumer AR/MR are things that will require a lot of people, massive companies like Meta, T-Mobile, Qualcomm, and all the other ones, universities, other companies as well, like startups like VictoryXR, for example. Yes, there are a lot of players in this. In terms of what we're doing with Qualcomm Snapdragon Spaces, with Qualcomm, for example, with that platform, we'd be able to bring the Metaversity to mixed reality, where you can, say, put these glasses on your face and interact with the environment around you and not lose that sense of in-person presence. So you have the best of both worlds. You can go to the moon using virtual reality, and you can also see a plant come to life in front of you and learn about the solar system as well in the middle of a classroom. And to truly enable all these experiences, to truly take them outside of an enclosed space and be mobile, you definitely need the power of 5G. And that's one of the many reasons that T-Mobile is actually investing in this space.
Can I just add 30 seconds to that? Because what we really see as a content creator and developer is that what T-Mobile is building, as well as this edge grid, where you can't have all the processing. There's a lot of graphics processing. You can't have it all on the device when it's on your face or on your head. To the extent that we can push the processing off to the edge, where you've got 5G with literally 30 milliseconds of latency, maybe less. You think about that, 30 milliseconds is about the speed that a hummingbird will flap their wings. And so if you've got that kind of latency going back and forth and the processing is done on the tower, then that suddenly changes everything, and it allows this ubiquitous, always-on connection to a immersive world.
That is right.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, the idea of an AR metaverse is really exciting, and I look forward to seeing how that develops. When we had a preparatory meeting for this panel, one of you said, we are all here for the future of learning. I don't know, was that you, Monica? Yeah, that was you. Okay, great quotation, yeah. Something I will remember. And we're saving time for questions from the audience, but as we start to wrap up this discussion, let's continue looking at the bigger picture and what it means for your organizations, for the educational institutions involved, and for society as a whole. And Sari, would you like to kind of pick up on what you were just saying and maybe take it to that next step?
T-Mobile's commitment
And
to
there's like 5G for good.
Oh yeah, no, T-Mobile's commitment to education. Yeah, so I'm sure you're all wondering what is an operator doing talking about education. Fun fact, we actually have a very, very large education team at T-Mobile. We truly believe in different 5G use cases within the education space, whether it's IoT, just basic internet for the schools and private networks, XR, of course, robotics, you name it. But outside of that, just at a very basic level, we believe in 5G for good. And as part of our commitment with the community, we launched a project called Project 10 Million, which interestingly enough has committed $10 billion, a little bit over $10 billion actually. And to my colleagues that are here, yes, it is $10 billion, don't freak out, to spend in providing connectivity across the country for students. I think we kickstarted it again at the beginning of the pandemic. So since the beginning of the pandemic, since 2020, we've provided connectivity to approximately 3.2 million students across the country. So it's Project 10 Million because we want to connect 10 million students, but the money that's allocated to it is around $10 billion. So it's providing connectivity, it's providing hardware, which includes your phone, your tablet, computers, and honestly, this really picked up a lot of momentum during the pandemic because the way that students were learning had to drastically change. And that also ties very nicely to all this momentum that you're seeing in the Metaversities work that is happening out there.
Great, thank you. Yeah, a little confusing. 10 million, Project 10 million is 10 million students, but T-Mobile is putting more than $10 billion into
yes,
it. Wow.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, huge commitment. Right. And so, Steve, why do we need Metaversities, and what do they mean for the future of education?
Oh, that's a hardball right there.
But you can handle it.
I believe that the greatest roadblock to learning is actually geography. If you think about it, where you are born, in most cases, will matter what type of education you receive. And I don't mean just in the United States. Let's say that you are destined to be, your brain is just the type that should be working on building chips, computer chips, right? but you're born in rural Mexico. Chances are you will never have that opportunity. But the problems of internet connectivity are being solved through space. What we have to do is be able to say to any student, whatever your dream is or your destiny is, you need to be able to come together in a school or a metaversity that doesn't make you hop on a jet and fly, across the country or around the world, or have to drive 100 miles back and forth to class every day. And so, if you think about environmental sustainability or equity in education, that's what this solves. And so, some people say, well, this just introduces, a greater issue because some students own headsets and some students don't own headsets. But I would suggest to you that the cost of transportation pretty quickly far outweighs the cost of a headset.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Beyond that, if you look at, and I can't speak for other countries, but if you look at the amount the federal government spent just in the pandemic, it would have bought every poor student in America a headset with a small fraction of what they just spent. So the issue is not cost. The issue is just the vision and the willingness and the dream to make it happen. And I'm preaching to the choir because I know the people here get that, but we have a lot of elected officials in both parties who don't quite get it yet, and so that's our job.
Great, thank you so much. And Monica, what is the opportunity we're looking at here? What is the promise of metaversities and education in the metaverse more generally?
I mean, I think for us, and you kind of touched upon it in the code, I think it's that we all need to do this together. And so whereas we might compete in business, I think the opportunity to step us all into the future of learning is something that we can all rally around together. And so collectively, I mean, imagine if we really can bring down the walls of museums and homes and schools and all of the barriers that are currently there in education. I really see the value of metaversities and just the metaverse in general for learning as really being the key way to actually increase access to education on a global level, as Steve just pointed out. It has the facility to do that, but also to fundamentally change how we learn. It's been a system that has stayed relatively stagnant for a very long time, and I think this brings back the engagement, the curiosity, the connectivity that we are all craving and that our students deserve, especially as we step them into the future of their work. And these are technologies that they will need to be fluent in as soon as they enter the workforce. And so I see that as the value. I think, collectively, everyone in this room, if we can even move the needle a tiny bit on that and add that value, then we will all retire very happy knowing that we were the ones who took those steps in and were able to set that path.
Great, thank you so much. And Dr. Morris, you're sometimes called Dr. Mom.
All the time.
Molder of minds, yes. Yeah, which is fantastic. I just love that. And what do you see in the future of education in the metaverse and how it will shape the minds of the generations to come?
So at this current state of schools and education and learning in America and around the world, we have a responsibility as educators to deliver on the promise. The promise of education is that it's the great equalizer, and it has not been that in so long. So I tell my students at Morehouse College that your degree is not enough. I'd like to say that it is, but it just isn't anymore. And you're gonna have to be innovative, you're gonna have to be entrepreneurial, you're gonna have to be creative, you're gonna have to develop these essential skills. And the way that we can do this and we can do it faster is through XR technologies, and it's through also developing young minds who are creators in this space, where they're building the worlds that they want to inhabit, that they're having conversations about complex issues with people around the world, and that they have the capacity to build the table. It's really important to empower our young people to know that the future and what this world is lies in their hands. And just simply by taking this small step forward, we're doing that. And we're giving our students back hope with a lot of compassion, empathy, and love. And I think that's really important because that's the crux of what education should be. It's bringing the humanity back to the classroom.
Wow. What an inspiring statement to kind of wrap up this panel. Thank you so much. And Let's take a little bit of time for some questions from the audience. We deliberately wanted to leave that. We wanted to have some back and forth, some engagement. So who would like to, Daesh, you have the microphone.
I have the mic, so there's a
Okay,
mic in the aisle, but I've
Yes, yes,
discovered,
see?
yes, if you walk there, I'll pass this mic on to you.
Hi. So I just had a question with curriculums for when you guys do have these in the universities. Are curriculums, I guess, baked by the professors that are giving the instruction, and they have the library and tools to go off of that?
So as professor, we have autonomy in our classrooms, and so it is up to us to follow the guidelines of our disciplines. And so we work hand in hand with, well, like for instance, Morehouse does with VictoryXR to make sure that they can bring to life some of the 3D environments that we want our students to learn in, and they do our professional development, so you'll not look like a blubbering mess of an avatar in space. But also, we as professors align our curriculum ourselves to our student learning outcomes and what the expectation is for student achievement at our institutions.
Got it. Thank you.
Hi, y'all can hear me? I am Dr. Wendy Whitener from Towson University, located in Towson, Maryland, which is in Baltimore County. And I have embarked on the VR officially a year of this month. And I have fallen so in love with it that I decided to take classes to build my own worlds so I can use it as a platform to teach my students. My specialty is in healthcare management, specifically in quality management. So I have a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, and I teach those principles to my students. Awesome. And I sold the idea to do this to my dean with the Oculus.
Good for you.
But I hit barriers because my simulation, because I'm in the college of health profession, so the simulation director, whatever, he was on board, but they're trying to figure out how we can scale it and enterprise issues regarding things. So I love to talk to Meta because she was ready to write the check until that. And I'm taken aback because I'm supposed to pilot test my prototype this fall.
Yeah,
So I need help.
I know, and this is a universal issue right now. Again, we built as a consumer device, and with that comes an immense amount of value, but it doesn't necessarily serve all purposes. And so we are now that we've really committed to the learning space, know that this is something that we need to put front and center of things that again, we need to collectively solve with our partners, with the industry to understand what the needs are and start building those solutions. And so we feel you. We have heard this from a lot of people. As a former educator, I absolutely understand the need and the value for this. So it's clearly top of mind, but you're right, those exact solutions aren't right at our fingertips to offer yet. So thank you for that, but we are definitely working on it.
Towson, yeah. From Ellicott City. I was a teacher in New Jersey for a little while. High school science,
Oh, yeah. you've been
environmental
through the
science.
trenches.
Dr. Morris, I had the question for you. Sounds like this is a new paintbrush, but it's more about the curriculum and connectivity to the student. Can you talk about how the technology might just be a little bit more passive, but it's all about connecting with the student and what that curriculum, just getting that message more clearly delivered via this mechanism may be?
So I think that the technology is what drives it. So we did virtual reality as less of an accessory or enhancement to what we were doing, and we really made virtual reality the classroom. So when I say get your avatar to class, that means that you're locked in and you're present, right? And so we wanted to make sure that our students weren't getting the exact same education that they could get through a Zoom space or even face-to-face, that the interactions that they had were something that had a wow factor. I'm a demo a day type of teacher, so you know what I mean by that, right? So it's the wow, the awe factor that you have to have. So it took a lot of creativity, but it took a lot of planning and collaboration amongst us as a cohort to be able to do it. And you can't do this thing alone. You have to talk to strategic partners, people who work with you in the industry, but also each other. Our professors were in the classroom with us, whether they were chemists or biologists or historians or English professors. We all did it together. And you have to harness the power of your collaborative effort in order to really move this forward. It's not something that can be done in a silo. And a lot of time in academic institutions, that's how we act, but you have to have this real peer review and from across disciplines.
Great, brilliant. So Dish, 3 minutes, okay.
One speaker
Yes.
here and one speaker with the mic.
Okay, all right.
All right.
Please go.
Thank you all for your commitment to learning. Fantastic panel. We very much went with you in this journey and wondering how you are tackling the question of scale. I hear, commencements happening, and we are navigating those waters ourselves, whether, and figuring out whether it's 6DOF, 3DOF, 2D, VR, and I'm open to the entire panel. I don't know who wants to take this, but how do you navigate that best practice?
Well, I can say you should use 6DOF. You just,
Yeah.
there's no comparison between 6DOF and 3DOF. 3DOF is a transition, so that's number one. Number two, we haven't really found a challenge with people who want to scale. The great thing is when you think about classrooms, and I'm going to save time here, you can think outside the box on classrooms. We had some professors who used a starship for a classroom, some that used a battleship, and some that used a fallopian tube. Any of those can be a classroom now. And yeah, Biology 105, Morehouse College. And so, yep.
Yeah, one more question, yep.
Just a quick one. Have you ever thought about how using this methodology in communication and learning might change the requirements needed for like certification or a diploma in terms of like the time spent learning? Because I've personally noticed in projects that I've worked on where they're converting curriculum to immersive mediums, and there's a certain hour like requirement that you have to like be learning the material. And to me, I'm like, 750 hours, that's a lot of time in VR. I don't think you actually need that much time. And and that's a big, also a huge burden on the creators and implementers, for something that's I don't think is necessary, because you can actually repeat a lot of the activities and do it for as long as you want. You don't have to, have an extended curriculum. So I was just wondering how you thought that landscape might change in terms of what's actually required of someone obtaining education through that medium.
I think that we definitely we're going to see new models arise, but if any of you briefly want to say a little bit?
I would say real quick, regulators never move quickly, so that's a challenge. But we are working with a healthcare partner for nurses to have to go from nursing school to actual practice, and they need, I can't remember what it's called, like practicum.
Yeah.
There aren't enough hours right now with actual doctors' facilities, so this is going to be one of those solutions.
Yeah, great, thank you. I would love to thank our panelists before we go. Sarah Lynn Menendez-Mendoza from T-Mobile, Steve Grubbs, CEO of VictoryXR, Monica Arez, the head of learning at Meta, and Dr. Messina Morris, the Metaversity Project at Morehouse College. Thank you.
And Dr. Karen Alexander. Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you all.